Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May meeting of the New York chapter of the Association for Recorded Sound Collections, acronymically known as ARSC. I'm Dennis Rooney, and I'd like to welcome you and also give you a brief report on ARSC's 53rd Annual Conference, which was held in Portland, Oregon, from the 8th to the 11th of this month, centered in the historic Benson Hotel. A pre-conference workshop entitled All Things Digital took place on Wednesday, presented jointly by the Technical and the Educational and Training Committees. President Carrie Janelle welcomed the attendees Thursday morning and followed it with a presentation about the Musical Modernization Act. As is usual, concurrent sessions followed, devoted to both technical matters and artistic and cultural ones. Leading off the former, David Giovannone moderated a panel on recent developments in audio retrieval via optical methods. Patrick Mittling led a panel on preservation of audio of wire recordings, magna belts and dicta belts, and Conrad Strauss chaired a panel on the preservation of content on lacquer discs. Matthew Barton chaired a panel on discography, and two panels were devoted to digitization. Spirituals, folk music, gospel music, and programs on performers as diverse as Roosevelt Sykes, Mel Blanc, Mahalia Jackson, Wilhelm Furtwängler, and Laurel and Hardy. The latter was part of a panel on film, television, and radio, which also featured our own Seth Winner, whose centenary program on Ernie Kovacs, whose inspired visual comedy was allied with music before music videos had a name. We're advised that we may expect a repeat performance, possibly next season, in this very room. In the closing banquet on Saturday, David Giovannone received a Lifetime Achievement Award, and Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon also received an award for his support in passing the Music Modernization Act. Next year, Montreal will be the site of our 54th National Conference, and more details can be found at ARSC's website, arsc-audio.org. I'm going to turn the program now over to Danielle Cordove, who will introduce our very special guest, Gilda Mirós. Danielle?
Hello, thank you for joining us. I met Gilda a few years ago and was just impressed by the amount of knowledge about history and culture relating to Latino musicians and artists, and I was excited to invite her to talk to you all today. Let me give you a little bit of history about Gilda. She's a Puerto Rican actress, author, advocate, producer, broadcaster, and all-around powerhouse who has appeared in film, theater, and television in Mexico, Puerto Rico, and North America. Some highlights from her illustrious career include being the first Latina personality with a daily 4-hour satellite radio show, publishing a series of books including Cecilia Cruz and Sonora Metancera, A Portrait of Puerto Rico, and a bilingual children's book co-authored with her mother titled Hortense and Her Happy Ducklings. In 2017, Gilda was honored with a star on the Walk of Fame at the Celia Cruz Plaza, named after the legendary Queen of Salsa, and received the 2019 Hometown Media National Award for her documentary titled Seniors Finally Say #MeToo. Materials from her broadcasting career are in an exhibit at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History at the Latino Center, and it's titled Escúchame, The History of Spanish Language Broadcasting in the United States, which is an exhibit that opens in 2021. But to learn more about the life and accomplishments of the Gilda Mirós before then, visit the websites for the Columbia University Actors Fund Performing Arts Legacy Project and the CUNY Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College, where her digital legacy and oral history are archived. You can also hear her close to 40 years of interviews with Latino icons like Rita Moreno, Marco Rizzo, Jose Feliciano on the Gilda Mirós podcast, which is pretty cool. Tonight's program will revisit the golden age of Latin music with humorous stories and reenactments of Gilda's experience with premier New York-based Latino composers and artists during the 80s and 90s. Without further ado, let us all welcome the amazing Gilda Mirós, along with her colleagues Hector Hubari, Marie Hernandez, and Eli Mendez, who has been Gilda's engineer for the past 15 years. Welcome.
Thank you, Danielle. Oh, my. Thank you so much. Danielle did this as a favor. She doesn't like public speaking. I begged her to please come and present us because she's like a godmother so far, and she has the passion that we all have, preserving history. I want to thank, of course, the Association for Recorded Sound Collections, Seth and Dennis, which have been so kind, and they've helped me to organize for tonight. It's a very emotional moment for me in my life. I'll be 81 in 4 months, and I've worked all my life, and I've been blessed. I started a little brief, as Danielle said. I was born in Santurce, Puerto Rico, raised in the South Bronx. I'm from the Boogie Land. I went to Mexico to study diction, became an actress, which later on helped me in radio and in broadcasting. I didn't know this. I became a model, actress, films, TV. No, TV didn't come in yet. Theater. And it's interesting because since you love history, this is important that I share this with you. I was very successful, thank God. I already had married, I had a little child, a little boy, and I came to New York to do some interviews for a film that was opening. And René Anselmo, God bless his soul, a Jewish Mexican man who's a visionary, had set up SIN, Spanish International Network, in Paterson, New Jersey, in an ambulance garage. And he started to broadcast from there live. This is pre-Univision. He saw me because they wanted to do Miss Puerto Rico 1970. I was the first Puerto Rican to become a Miss Universe, Marisol Malaret. They wanted to do a satellite, first satellite program, live, Puerto Rico, New York. They invited me to co-host. I said, I've never done this before. I guess because I was an actress and I was then young and vibrant, whatever, I did it. After that satellite special with Paquito Cordero there, and I was here, they invited me to start a show called Sundays in New York, Channel 41. Again, pre-Univision, first 4-hour live talk show in New York, Spanish New York, with Carlos Montalban, Ricardo Montalban's brother. I did that. Okay. When Mr. Anselmo told me, I want you to do a talk show, I said, thank you. But Mr. Anselmo, I'm sorry, but I'm pregnant with my second child. I can't accept it. He said, you are going to do the show pregnant or not. And I was the first Latina on live TV pregnant to do commercials and to do a show. All this the Smithsonian found out about. That's why they approached me. And it's part of the collection. After that ended, a year after, I had my little baby, 2 children, divorced, single mother. It's a very common story. I went to Vietnam, entertained the troops during the Vietnam War. Came back, did some shows. I needed to stabilize my life. This is important because I'll lead to this, why this is important. I said, I have to get a job. I can't be flying to New York and Puerto Rico. I have 2 little boys. I have to get a job for the okay, I'll go to the Puerto Rican offices and maybe they'll give me a job. And I got a job as a public relations specialist in the office, Puerto Rican Commonwealth of Puerto Rico office. That was important in this because one day they tell me, you have to go to WADO radio. They want to interview you about what the Puerto Rican government is doing about the Puerto Rican Day Parade in New York. I didn't want to go. I'm not going to talk about it. So took the bus, went. When I was coming into the WADO studio, I bumped into a gentleman, and the man next to him was the program director. He says, this is the owner of WADO radio. I said, oh, mucho gusto, Mr. Laverne. And I said, oh, Mr. Laverne, may I have a meeting with you sometime? He says, make an appointment. Okay, make an appointment. I went, I was interviewed in the talk show they had by a male, no females, males. And when I was about to finish the interview, the program director comes to me and says, Mr. Laverne wants to speak to you right now. I said, well, he said I should make an appointment. No, he wanted to talk to you now. I go and he says, what is it that you want to tell me? I said, well, in your programming, you have no females and you don't have any female shows. He says, you're wrong. We have a show called Mujer. Aha. Who does Mujer? A man. Oh, and what did the man do? He used to buy all the magazines, like Mujer and whatever, Cosmopolitan and Español, and he would read articles on the air. By the way, I used to do all the commercials for Cadena de Armas in Venezuela, who had all those magazines. Anyway, he said, thank you very much. Goodbye. I said, okay. I went back to work. The next day, Luis Armando Feliciano, the director of programming, called me and said, Gilda, Mr. Laverne wants to offer you a job as an announcer. I said, oh, but you have to start next week. So we have to know like tomorrow. Okay, what will I do? You're going to be a staff announcer, like anybody else. No privileges. Okay, no. First you're going to start doing a little show, and then we'll see about being a staff announcer. Okay, I said, I have the government of Puerto Rico that promises me a pension. I have a steady job. I have 2 little boys. What should I do? I called my mom. She said, take it. My mom said, take it. I said to Mr. Torre, whatever his name, my boss, excuse me, I'm going to radio. He says, they're going to dump you in a month. You should not do that. I said, I'm going to do it. I started doing Mujer, and we changed the title. No solo para nosotras was the title of the show, from Mujer. And the man that did it was so upset that I was coming in that my first day at work, he didn't go to work. So I was stuck with half an hour to fill in with no interviews, no guests. I said, let's open the phones and I can talk to the listeners. And I started back and forth. From there, he said, okay, you're going to do 4 hours every day, but you're going to do the news, you're going to do the weather, you're going to turn the cable, the records, if you have to go to the bathroom, put on a long record, put the cartridges. This was my job at WADO radio, female. After a while, I became very good at interviewing because I had exposure in films, theater. I needed an engineer. And I told him, could you please get me an engineer so he can do everything I have to do? I cannot interview people and do everything. Check the levels and put the record and go to commercials. They thought I was a pain, that I was a diva. This woman thinks she deserves everything. But there was a young man, an intern, copying commercials. He must have been 20. And they said, let's dump him into the wild woman here. And that was Eli. 30 years ago, I think. Eli, a little bit about what you wanted to say, and then we'll start reading.
I was actually discussing this with Hector before Hilda walked in, that, yeah, I was a young whippersnapper, like they say, and, you know, green behind the ears, didn't know much, and when they approached me at the station and said, hey, there's this show that is looking for an engineer, are you interested? And me being a young green behind the ears kind of kid, I said, sure, why not? I mean, how bad could it be? I don't know. And I can honestly say that the first day that I met Hilda and that we spoke and that we interacted with each other, I knew that great things, not good things, but great things would come of the show. And I decided to sink all my energies and all my creative input, whatever I could do to help Hilda, I wanted to do for her, because I believed in what she was doing, and I believed that it was important for the Spanish community. The timing of it was dead on. Everything led to Hilda having a successful show, and my heart was in it. And when your heart is in it, you give your all, and you don't look back. You just look forward, and you look for greater and bigger things.
Well, we clicked. He's like a son to me. I would look at him, he knew what I wanted. And much of the material in this book, he recorded for me. Now, Eli is Director of Engineering at United Stations Radio Networks in Manhattan. He has a lot of responsibilities. He's a successful young man, and I'm proud of him. So thank you. He's going to be reading for us his part, because what happened is this, and I want to introduce Hector Ubarri. I have the pleasure of sharing with him the Performing Arts Legacy Project. He's one of the new performers in our website. He has an outstanding career. He was born in Arecibo, Puerto Rico, arrived in New York City at the age of 4. His credits include Broadway, films, and television. He is best known for playing Rico, the drug kingpin in the blockbuster Crocodile Dundee 2. Hector has been on Broadway with fellow Puerto Rican actors Jose Ferrer and Raul Julia in the musical Man of La Mancha. And his cabaret shows have included songs by Bobby Capó that he will be reading and acting when we perform this on stage as a musical review. Thank you, Hector, for being here with me. Cheryl Marie, please come down. Cheryl Marie will be reading, Hector's going to be reading a few subjects, a few cast members. And Cheryl Marie is a New York-based actor specializing in physical comedy, devised theater, and vocal performances. She's a graduate of NYU's Master's Program in Educational Theater and Columbia University's Bachelor of Arts, Ethnicity and Race Studies. Cheryl Marie comes to Latino Icons on Broadway, the name of the musical review, for her interest in oral history and the preservation of Latinx culture. Cheryl Marie, please take this seat here, and I'm going to read from the introduction to the book, por favor. Gracias. Here it is. Now we come to the book. My mother has been very important in my life, as you can tell, not only because she took care of me and my brother, but my little kids while I worked. I got the worst shifts. I had to be on the air at 7 in the morning, ready to go with news and everything. And my 2 little boys needed care. She helped me. But not only that, when I was interviewing icons from all Latin America, because everybody comes to New York, we were blessed, Eli and I. We had the top show, radio Spanish show in New York. So all the big ones came. But I didn't care if they were being, like they used to say, the hit parade or playing. Because if you're an icon in Argentina, Costa Rica, República Dominicana, you're an icon. Just because you come to New York doesn't stop that. So I said, I want everyone to interview them. I started to interview, and my mom said, that's oral history. Why don't you record them? I said, that's important. Yes, she said, it's important. So I started to do the cassettes, or the reel-to-reel. Eli made copies. Some of them they took, some I saved. And finally, I've moved. I was from New York. I had to leave. Eli, okay. I was offered, after we became very big, Wado, JIT, and look at the way that he asked me to work for him. He calls the program director. Hello, can you meet us after work? Oh, yeah, hi, Frank, I'll meet you. I sit in this restaurant, and the man comes in, very important. He says, how much do you make? I said, I'm making $60,000 a year. He says, I'll triple it. But you have to say yes right now. I said, yes. And we moved. But I took Eli with me. So we were together. I had to leave him because then Raúl Alarcón, because Spanish Broadcasting, said, he called, Gilda, I'm doing national radio from Florida, Miami, and New York. I need you here. I said, you can't afford me. First time I saw it, I speak like that. He says, yes, I can. But I need you here in 2 weeks because we start programming then. I said, he says, we'll sign a contract when I come down. I said, no, we'll sign the contract before I go down. I did, and I moved to Florida. And I did that. Coast to coast, live. Anyway, I had to leave Eli. This book is a product of my, how many years? From 1970. Interviews. It's 410 pages. It's like 10 hours long. I wrote it while I was a caregiver, taking care of my mother and my father. I took care of them and I wrote. And it kept me sane. And I was overjoyed. I didn't think anybody was going to read my book. Did it on my computer. Text. Became e-book, and now it's an audio book. And it's going to be a musical review in the theater. Short. Okay. Let's start reading. We're going to read only a few pages because it's too long. Hector, Eli is going to play himself. There's going to be an actor playing him in the theater. And Cheryl Marie's doing 3 parts also. So I want you to know that this is a multi-dimensional, multimedia musical review in 2 acts. It's called Latino Icons on Broadway. And you know what it is? We are celebrating our roots, our musical contribution to New York. That's what I want to share with the young people and from people from all over the world. We are proud of what we brought to this culture. Okay. Now, I have a recording from 1940 from one of the Escambron Beach Club in Puerto Rico. As people come in, they're going to be hearing the radio transmission. 1946 WKQ. There's going to be a radio studio is our set. And there's a spotlight on a frozen announcer, which is me, sitting in the studio with the engineer Eli facing me. We're going to be using, these are spirits. And I must confess, I believe in the soul, and I believe we're eternal. So the age, we have no age. Our soul has no age. The body withers, we continue. So these performers are coming back to tell us their story. This is a transcription of their interviews. This is not me saying, Tito Puente me dijo, La Lupe me dijo. No, this is them speaking. Okay? So it is history. So Eli's going to start. Adelante, por favor.
Hello, my name is Eli. Welcome to the WADO radio station. In the past, in lovely Carlstadt, New Jersey, I'm going to be your audio engineer tonight. And over there is the host of our show, Gilda. Back in 1983, when I was in my mid-20s, just starting out my career, I was assigned to work on a new talk show called No Solo Para Nosotras, hosted by a magnetic, inspiring professional woman named Gilda Mirós. She was truly a force of nature. Most of you don't know this, but Gilda was the first Hispanic woman to bring a female perspective to the New York airwaves 4 days a week. Throughout the mid-1980s and the entire 1990s, Gilda was the #1 Spanish radio personality in the greater New York City area. She received many awards and accolades from the city of New York, and she even had a number of her listeners name their newborn daughters after her. To her listeners, she was known as La Dama de la Radio, the Lady of the Airwaves. But back in the early 1980s, having a woman hosting a radio show during the day was groundbreaking. Up until then, the only voices you heard over the airwaves were male. Sure, sometimes these male announcers might have a female co-host on their shows, but there had never been a female host who took center stage over the airwaves like Gilda did.
Okay, Eli signals to Gilda, tells her how much time is left. We have an action. In other words, there's monitors, several photographs of famous guests that I've interviewed, and Eli continues speaking to the audience.
She produced and directed the show and did in-depth one-on-one interviews with some of the biggest names in the Latino music world. These legends would share stories of their humble beginnings back in their homelands like Cuba, Puerto Rico, Colombia, all Latin America, and tell Gilda fascinating stories of their careers up till the present. Throughout the interviews, she gave listeners an inside look, not only of the history of the artist, but also of the history of the Latino music here in the great city of New York. Anyone who was anybody in the Hispanic music scene came to talk to Gilda. New artists, award-winning singers, musicians, songwriters, producers, composers, even those who had been long forgotten by the public came to speak to her. The pioneers, the icons, those were the ones that her listeners loved hearing the most.
Guest number 1, Raúl Azpiazu. He enters the booth, the radio station. Eli shakes his hand and motions for him to sit and wait for Gilda to start the show. Raúl sits in a chair in the corner out of Eli's way. Eli gives Gilda a wave that the show is starting. The lights dim, and on the air in front, pre-recorded vintage radio transmission. Okay, let's see here. Am I okay? Yes, I think. Yes. Amorosamente, Gilda Mirós. There's a jingle. And hello, dear ones. Amorosamente, this is Gilda Mirós. My guests are all in the spirit plane. But today they come back with your musical prayers to entertain us with your stories and music. They are arriving with their loves, joys, or disappointments, dressed up to review their lives. They come with hopes that someday they can return here to the planet Earth with a great spiritual serenade of peace and love, to make and share more beautiful music. Now they are spirits, apparitions, good musical souls who have loved all the instruments. May God's peace reign with them and with us all. We will hear now pre-recorded playing of El Manicero, the Peanut Vendor, by Raúl Azpiazu Orchestra. We will show a newsreel of El Manicero projected overhead screen. Eli?
Hear that catchy number? It's based on a pregón, a Cuban street seller's cry called El Manicero, the peanut vendor, which was to become and remains today one of the most famous pieces of Latin popular music. The band leader was Don Azpiazu, whose orchestra had been one of the principal attractions of Havana's Casino Nacional for half a dozen years, and who was about to unleash on New York. In the wake of the success of the Argentinian tango, authentic Cuban music for the first time. Don Azpiazu Havana Casino Orchestra took the stage of the Palace Theater on Broadway for the first time on April 26, 1930, attired in white ruffled shirts and red peasant neck chiefs, equipped with a full range of Latino percussion and playing a repertoire primarily consisting of Cuban sones, danzones, and congas, plus the occasional tango. Certain numbers featured an exhibition dance interlude based on the rumba, a glamorized version by contrast with the packing case percussion backed street version of Cuba's African community, but startling new, raw, and sexy to American theater audiences.
There's something I must say, apart from the script. In this book, Alicia Parla is not included. I had forgotten that I had interviewed the Queen of the West. The first libretto didn't include Alicia Parla. October of last year, I'm reviewing, and I see a picture, and I think, this is Alicia Parla. She used to dance with Don Azpiazu's orchestra. How could I forget that I interviewed her? For TV, I interviewed her in Florida. I looked up the interview, heard the interview, and she tells me how it happened. And you know what day it was? It was a day we were celebrating the day she died, that I found her recording. I said, she wanted to be in this, and she's in it now. So that's Alicia Parla. Now, Eli?
The dancer that Don Azpiazu chose to dance the rumba was his orchestra around the globe. It was Alicia Parla, which Gilda just mentioned, a Cuban-born American dancer who in the early 1930s reigned as queen of the rumba. She became an American and a European sensation with her sensual dancing. She even attracted the attention of several members of European royalty. She had a brief but incandescent run as the international queen of the rumba. Let's listen to Alicia when she spoke to Gilda about her time with Don Azpiazu.
When Don Azpiazu reached New York City, he brought a couple of dancers, Ofelia and Pimienta. They were beautiful, fantastic African dancers, magnificent. The best he had found in Cuba at that time. But when they arrived and were presented to the agency that had signed them, which was the William Morris Agency, at that time in the United States, the show had to be all black or all white. But that race mix was not acceptable. So Azpiazu was without dancers and had to start searching in New York. Then almost no one was dancing Cuban. Cuban music had not taken root yet. But as I had always wanted to dance, and was dancing constantly from the morning to night with the Victrola, in my building lived a dance teacher by the name of Carrera that taught the neighborhood girls. He told my mother, an orchestra from Cuba has arrived in New York with 18 professors, great musicians. Due to the problem in Cuba, all the musicians wanted to leave the island. So Don Azpiazu was lucky to bring the cream of Cuban musicians to New York. The teacher also said, and he is looking for a girl who can dance Cuban, and Alicia dances lovely. Well, it was lots of work, but finally I went to an audition with Azpiazu. When I arrived, there were more than 150 women there. Greek, Italian, from all the countries of the world, plus Cuban. And all said they danced a rumba. Finally, I got my turn, wearing a headscarf, and my mother had made me a light wrap dress. Azpiazu said, "Well, I imagine that you are Cuban, no?" I told him, "Yes, I am Cuban. And you will know it, because my last name is Parla. My uncle was the first Cuban aviator." He said, "Parla, Agustin?" He said, "Of course, let me watch you. Dance, dance." He was tired because he had seen so many girls. I danced my little rumbita and charmed him. Plus, I was 17 years old. He told me, "We have a contract for all of the United States." So I made my debut at the Palace on Broadway. And from there, we traveled throughout the United States. I did that tour with Azpiazu. Then he went to Cuba with all the musicians again. But Azpiazu told me, "This does not end here, Alicia. Let me see if I return in the coming year."
There will be photographs of Alicia Parla, and there's a dancer that comes on stage, and the spotlight will follow her. She is Alicia dancing. So this is a musical review where in between the scenes we have choreography. This is the first rumba. Adelante. I say, authentic Cuban music arrived in the United States in 1930 with the Havana Casino Orchestra presenting El Manicero at the Palace Theater on Broadway in New York City, and then converting it into an extraordinary musical success in English as The Peanut Vendor. 5,078,000 RPM records were sold in the United States, and both versions became international hits, El Manicero and The Peanut Vendor. Let us remember Don Azpiazu. His son, Raul Azpiazu, is visiting us today. Raul, thank you. Thank you for this gift. Raul comes in, sits down. Let me speak a little about you. Raul Azpiazu is a high society singer. He sings in Spanish, English, Italian, and Portuguese. He is also a composer, orchestra director, and he plays the saxophone and percussion. Raul has performed at the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana in London with the Leicester Lennon Orchestra, founded 60 years ago. Raul also performed at the inauguration of President Reagan at the Kennedy Center. I congratulate him on all his many achievements.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk. Not of me, but of my father. The truth is, he deserves all the glory. And so far, you're the only one that has given me this opportunity to speak. So, I don't know how to thank you enough.
Oh, and then we will have the joy of speaking with Chiquito Socarrás, that for a few years performed with Don Azpiazu's orchestra. Raul, are you originally from Cienfuegos, Cuba?
My father was from Cienfuegos. I was born in Havana.
Oh, how do you remember your father as a child? How do you remember him?
Well, he was always very affectionate, a very intelligent person, well-mannered, lived in New York City as a boy, went to college, finally becoming an English professor at a trade school, although he didn't do it much because he was always dreaming about music, to be in music. His number one interest was music, and he dedicated himself to that end and said, even if I die from hunger, that is what I want to do.
Who brought your dad to New York?
My uncle, Mario Antovari, brought him. His real name was Eusebio Azpiazu. He also had his orchestra, but he changed his name so to be easily promoted in the U.S. His spouse was very devoted to the theater, to what was called at that time vaudeville.
Yes, his wife, listen to this, Marion Sunshine, was a songwriter, actress, author, and a singer, interested, and it's very interesting that an American girl had so much interest in Latin American music.
Yes, from Kentucky. And she never learned to speak Spanish.
How did she become so interested in Cuban music?
Well, in 1929, she went to Havana and was delighted with Havana and Cuban music. And there she met my father. She produced the show and brought it here in 1930 to the Palace Theater.
Yes, and Marion had very good contacts with American businessmen.
With Keith, who was the owner of the RKO circuit. The RKO circuit of theaters in all of the United States.
And the most popular of the theaters was the Palace.
Yes, the Palace.
Chiquito Socarrás told me that the Hippodrome was the largest of all the RKO theaters. That they also appeared there in 1930. It was on 52nd Street and 6th Avenue. But the interesting thing about the presentation of the Don Azpiazu Orchestra was not only to play El Manicero, but in the form he presented it. Tell me a little bit about that idea he had.
Well, before they raised the curtain, the singers came out, 4 singers. One playing the maracas, the other the guitar, the other the clave sticks, and the other the tres guitar. They came out singing a guajira, a very typical Cuban genre. And at the end of the guajira, they climbed the stage stand, and that grand orchestra, he was so advanced. You can hear it in the records. And it was a big impact. A success so great, according to my uncle. Everyone was going down the street whistling El Manicero.
Then Marion Sunshine had it recorded in English.
Yes, and presented it all in all the theaters of the United States and Europe at the London Palladium.
We also highlight other Latinos that resided in New York City. In 1920, Javier Cugat was here. He played tangos. Enrique Madriguera also played tangos and ballroom music. We should mention Nilo Melendez, the composer of Those Green Eyes, Aquellos Ojos Verdes, who was in the United States.
We should also give credit to all the orchestras. Most non-Cubans, but Puerto Rican, that maintain the music above all.
Effectively. We have to mention the example. We had Machito, Mario Bauzá, Graciela, Noro Morales, Chano Pozo, Juan Tisol, Augusto Cohen, Vicente Ziegler, who played at the Waldorf Astoria, the Cuban violinist Alberto Insnaga, Alberto Socarrás, a flutist who is not related to Chiquito. But certainly Don Azpiazu holds a very special place. Dimmer and Gilda and Eli.
As the audio engineer, my main job is to sit in this audio booth, listening to the levels, to make sure that the microphones are picking up whatever Hilda and whoever her guest was that day could be heard clearly over the air.
He plays with the dials and levels, gives thumbs up, and you go on.
I would also make any technical adjustments that needed to be made, and I listened for cues for the next caller or when to play the next commercial. Sometimes Hilda would interview her guests over the phone, so they didn't necessarily come to the studios. They had to call in to do it. So I was in charge of making sure that their call was clear enough to be heard, not only her, but the audience as well.
Eli sees the red light of the phone ringing in the studio. He picks it up and tells the caller to hold on. He waves to Hilda to let her know her next guest is on the phone. She waves to him to begin.
Such was the case when we interviewed the legendary Cuban singer Jose Chiquito Socarrás.
We played music, Chiquito Socarrás singing. That was Don Azpiazu and his orchestra with Jose Chiquito Socarrás singing. And we have Chiquito on the phone line. We are going on the air. Chiquito, how are you today?
Aha! And you?
Oh, well, I'm very happy. Raúl Azpiazu is with me. And we thank you that you are going to tell us a little bit about your life when you were singing with Don in 1932.
In 1930.
Oh.
I started with him.
Chiquito, where were you born?
I was born in Camagüey.
How did your career begin?
I started singing when I was 10 years old I sang in the theaters as a child.
Where?
At the theater. My uncles took me to the concerts and that.
And what did you sing? Everything?
Cuban songs.
The Cuban son. What songs?
Sindo Garay, the troubadour song.
Oh, and what happened? When did you meet Don Azpiazu?
Oh, I worked in Havana. I worked in the Cafe Vista Alegre. Then a friend of mine who knew me from Camagüey saw me and asked me, "Why aren't you singing here with a good orchestra?" I said, "Because here the orchestras don't use singers." And he said, "Don Azpiazu has singers. He is the only one with singers at the National Casino." Then he said, "I saw Don Azpiazu, and he told me that he was looking for 2 singers." So I said, "Make the connection." He called him, and Don Azpiazu gave me an appointment. So I went to his house, and he gave me an audition. That was in 1929. Then he heard me singing and told me, "I'm going to take you to New York. And so you won't sign with another. I will pay you without working, because within 4 weeks, we leave for New York."
Muy bien, muy bien.
I got paid without working for 4 weeks. While we made all the arrangements, passports and all those things, Machín was also in the same group. The 4 singers were going.
But who were the 4? Who were the 4?
Machín, Daniel, Chapín, and me. Chapín, who sang with me El Panquelero, en La Mulata Rumbera, en La Cachimba de San Juan, also Lamento Brincano, all the records. The only record Antonio Machín did was El Manicero and El Amor Sincero. All the rest I did. Me odias, te quisiera besar, and the Guajira.
Where did you perform at first in New York?
At the Palace. 2 weeks at the Palace, from there to the Hippodrome, 2 weeks at the Hippodrome, and from there to the Paramount on Broadway.
Chiquito, what kind of public went to the Palace in 1930?
Oh, the audience was the best. That was the best theater in the world then. The world's biggest stars were there.
Did they like Latino music?
Oh, very much. You had to see the lines outside to enter the theater. We had a great success here, and then we went to Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit, Boston, Philadelphia. We went all the circuit of the RKO. We did like 8 months, and from there we went to the Casino de La Habana in Cuba. From the Casino de La Habana we went to France, Monte Carlo, but Machín was not with us.
Why?
No Machín. They left him out. Let him go here in New York on the 4th week, because Machín didn't want to sing in a live radio program when we went to NBC.
He didn't want you to sing?
No, we each had to sing a number, but he said no, that he was Machín, that is that. Well, Azpiazu then threw him out.
I understand that you had to sing in English, no?
No, we sang the foxtrots. He showed us the foxtrots in Spanish because he wrote the lyrics in Spanish. Don Azpiazu did. And then he taught us the voices as Americans sing. We sang in the band, but in Spanish, the foxtrots. That was very pretty.
Now they all went to Paris, London, and Brussels.
We went to Monte Carlo first. We were there 10 weeks in Monte Carlo. From there we went on to Paris, the Empire Theater. That was the best theater in Paris. Then we went to the Olympia Theater. After that we went to a bigger theater, the Plantation in Colonia.
There's light changes. Remember, there's vapor because these are spirits. Spotlight on a dancer, Alicia Parla, the queen of the rumba. She's dancing El Panquelero, sung by Chiquito. Now, here is Alicia in a voice-over.
Azpiazu returned to New York and called. He said, "Now we have a plan to go to Europe to inaugurate the Casino of Monte Carlo." Then came the problem that I was a minor, and father in Havana did not know all this. After many conversations and an uncle of mine who intervened, leave her, please, I finally sailed with my mother and with Azpiazu's orchestra to Europe to debut at the Monte Carlo Casino. In Monte Carlo, after the initial rehearsal, Azpiazu tells me, Alicia, I have to say something that is going to cause you much grief. They don't want you to dance. No one can dance the rumba in the Monte Carlo Casino because they consider that it is a vulgar dance, which is African, and they don't want that. I explained everything, that you're an 18-year-old girl who was raised in a convent and always with your mom by your side. Well, I cried a lot. He said, be quiet and think you are going to spend 2 months vacationing in Monte Carlo, and then we will debut in Paris. You are going to debut with us. I wanted you to debut in Monte Carlo, but they said no. Well, Gilda, the night of the debut, Azpiazu had us sit in a secluded table near the orchestra, my mom and me. The orchestra came out with guaracheras, very fine shirts with lace and colored scarves, white pants, white shoes, divine. There was everybody of worth and wealth, Maurice Chevalier, English royalty, the shining audience of Paris, artists, the Dame Beatrice of Spain. I was sitting at my table when a man approaches and tells me in English, can I sit in this chair? And I said, of course. Therefore, he sat with us at the table. The musicians began playing. Nobody was moving because nobody knew our music, the Cuban song. Azpiazu followed his repertoire and suddenly started to play La Mulata Rumbera. The man at the table asked us if I was the girlfriend of the musician. Girlfriend? And I replied, no, I'm not. I am the dancer of the group. Looking at the program, he asked me, and why are you not here? And I said, because you see that man with the monocle over there, the casino director? He said that I could not dance the rumba. And I felt hatred towards him. The American said, well, why didn't he want you to dance? Well, I'm the dancer, but not here in the casino. I dance a very refined rumba, but I just never wanted to dance with a partner because I felt that the rumba is so sensual, and with a man it's more, for those days when those things weren't allowed. I said, the music they're playing now is what I dance with. And he then said, well, why don't you get up and dance? I said, they'll throw me out. He said, they already threw you out. Now here you are a spectator, no more. Get up. I had a very long evening gown, so I lifted my skirt, moved to the dance floor, and I danced my rumba, the rumba I did always. Suddenly I saw Azpiazu looking at me while shaking his baton, signaling for me to continue, and the musicians cheering me on, so I danced. The casino director dropped his monocle, because he had not expected that. So when I finished my dance, everyone applauded and shouted, more, more. Well, that American gentleman who told me to dance was a journalist from the New York Times, who had gone to cover the opening of the casino. The next day, Azpiazu came to me saying, I have great news. Tonight, you will make your debut with us.
There's a spotlight on the dancer, Alicia Pabla, dancing off stage. Spotlight follows her. Change this vapor, and we're going on to another scene. Eli?
Hosting a radio show and being on the show are quite different things. And Gilda understood the struggle. She made it sound easy. To be honest, the preparations she put into the show and the research on her guests was impressive. And that's true. She would interview a singer, then a doctor or a lawyer or some other type of a professional and not miss a beat. Again, very true. That was due in part to her preparation. She was good at what she did, but beyond that, she was prepared. And I think Gilda's own work ethic was such that she was prepared for every person that walked in. Whether she would do her research in 5 to 10 minutes or already have an idea on the background of the person she was going to interview. Even if she didn't know them, some came easier than others. Obviously, with singers and people with that kind of background, she knew a lot about them. It was easier for her on that front. Especially Puerto Rican artists such as Rafael Hernandez, who was a songwriter of hundreds of Latin American popular songs. He specialized in Puerto Rican and Cuban styles such as the bolero and guaracha. Maestro Marin passed away in 1965, but Gilda interviewed his sister, Victoria, on the show to discuss his extraordinary contribution to Latin American music.
There is a photo of Victoria Hernandez, 1983, Rafael Hernandez. And we have here the Cuarteto Victoria, under the direction of Maestro Rafael Hernandez, was founded in New York. Did you listen to that? Cuarteto Victoria, under the direction of Maestro Rafael Hernandez, was founded in New York in 1934. By the way, I have to ask an authority. It is Victoria Hernandez, Rafael Hernandez's younger sister, who is with us through the magic of the phone. Victoria, when did you move to New York City?
Well, when Puerto Rico became part of the U.S., they came to the island looking for musicians for the 65th South Carolina Regiment. Then Rafael enlisted and took all the musicians who were playing with him at the theater. They all came here and went to the South, and then went on to France. They were in France 1 year, and when they returned, Rafael asked us to come here. I left Puerto Rico on July 5th, 1919. I am the only person who knows the life of Rafael. Everything else they say is not true.
Well, I will not interrupt. Please continue.
We opened a business in 1927 on Madison Avenue and 114th Street in El Barrio. We first opened a tiny store, and when they vacated a larger storefront across the street, we moved.
What was the record store?
That was the record store called Hernandez Music Store. Then I sold it to Mr. Cuevas, and he called it Almacenes Hernandez. We were there 14 years, selling music, records, guitar strings, you know. I had a studio where I gave piano lessons, and that was where Rafael composed all of his songs. Nobody bothered him, nobody said anything to him. He was there writing. I'm going to tell you what he did. He said to me, Victoria, I have some melodies in my mind that are bothering me, and until I take them off my mind, I have no peace of mind. I have always believed that my brother's inspirations were spiritual.
Amen. That is beautiful.
They were spiritual. It wasn't something from here on earth. I say this sincerely. Then he went into that room and he began. He wrote music and wrote the lyrics at the same time. He did not write the music and then the lyrics. No, he wrote the music and the lyrics until he finished it right there. He didn't write one song only. There were days that he did 5 and 6 songs, one after the other. Then when he finished, he would tell me, well, give me $1 that I need. I already took all that out of my mind. He asked me every morning for $1.
Like a child. And what would he do with $1?
Well, at that time, everything was cheap. He went with friends to make rice with codfish and fried sweet potatoes. You know, with the guitars. He was a bohemian. That's the truth. He didn't want to know about obligations or about the house or anything else. He just wanted to know about his music. I was responsible for all debts. I was in charge of everything. If they came for his services, he said, speak with Victoria, and if she says okay, I don't want to know about any business.
Victoria, do you ever think that God sent you as an important instrument to give him the tranquility to be able to achieve everything that he did?
You are not alone. There are many people who have realized that. Do you remember Santiago Grevi?
Oh, yes, of course. A pioneer of Latino radio in New York City.
Well, Santiago was very fond of us. And one day talking with him, he said, Puerto Rico, Victoria, is in debt with you. Because if it had not been that you were next to Rafael today, Puerto Rico would not have a composer like Rafael was. I was everything. I'm going to tell you another story. The first Latino orchestra presented here in this country was that of Rosita Moreno, a Spanish performer. Her show was the first Latino show on Broadway at the Capitol Theater. I dressed Rafael with a tuxedo, with shoes, which were all matched. The whole day was dedicated to him, and at 5 p.m, I had to go with him, taking him to Broadway. I had to do that.
Why did you leave the store?
Well, I will say one thing. I wanted to put an end to the store because if I let my brother Rafael alone with the quartet to perform in Puerto Rico, I knew the quartet was going to fail. because Rafael had no character to control the boys, nor to control himself.
The Victoria Quartet was named Victoria Quartet for you, is that right?
For me, I was the manager, I understood contracts. So the first time we went to Puerto Rico was when Carlos Gardel was in Puerto Rico for the first time. He left the theater, and then we entered the next day. Gardel worked in the Three Flags Theater at the Marina area, Old San Juan. We remained 3 months in Puerto Rico and came back here.
I have here a recording of Linda Quisqueya, the lovely song that he wrote for the Dominican Republic. When was he inspired to compose it?
Dominican Republic. In 1928, he was hired by a record label from Puerto Rico because he worked for Columbia Records and traveled with the trio. He played with Antonio Mesa, who was Dominican. It was nothing more than a trio. When they returned home, he wrote Linda Quisqueya because they worked in Puerto Rico and worked in Santo Domingo.
Someone mentioned that he lived in Cuba for 6 years.
He lived in Cuba for 6 years. When he returned from France, that the head of the regiment was killed, the band dissolved. He then went to work at a site here making knobs. These knobs placed on beds, and it took half a finger off. Hence, they gave $500 in compensation. He got a call from Cuba and left alone and lived there from 1920 to 1925. He returned from Cuba with the bolero rhythm in his head because he was not a composer of boleros. He was a composer of danzones and waltzes. That's when he started his trio. He wrote his first composition in 1925. It was for a girl called Guané. It was the great love of his life. Guané was her name.
Where was it built from?
This girl was Puerto Rican. He was visiting the home of the girl's godmother when she came to visit. They fell in love and were separated. They didn't continue. Then he dedicated Capullito de Azucena to her.
Is that Capullito de Alelí, or is that another song?
No, that came later. Capullito de Alelí he wrote in 1927. That was what took him to Mexico. His first composition was Canta Pajarito. Later he wrote Capullito de Azucena. Then he wrote Why Do I Want to Live? But all these compositions were dedicated to that woman, to the great love of his life. On his deathbed, he spoke about her and said to me, "That's how much I love Guané. I was so in love with her."
Oh my God.
Yes, the love of his life.
What happened?
I think it was the woman who truly loved him because she never demanded anything from him, never asked for anything. It was all love. She was very jealous. Yes, she was very jealous. But he loved her.
Did she die before him?
Listen, he died on the 11th of December, 1965. She was good and healthy then. Suddenly, she'd also died in May, 4 or 5 months after, from a blood clot to the lung.
As if to remain with him.
As if he had taken her to accompany him.
Everything has been very poetic in the life of Maestro Rafael Hernandez.
Oh, yes, yes. His best songs, he wrote them in El Barrio, Spanish Harlem, in the neighborhood where we were in the store, because there he found all the comfort, piano at hand, quiet, both monetary and spiritual. There was all the inspiration. Look, in the Barrio he composed Capullito de Alelí, and then the sponsor, Sal de Pico, hired him and took him to Mexico. He always worked with Sal de Pico. You know that it was a Puerto Rican company. Capullito caught, well, it was a boom there. He stayed 18 years in Mexico, back and forth, because the RCA Victor label sent for him to record, as director and recording his songs with the Casino de la Playa Orchestra. That's where he met René Cabell, who sang his songs.
What about his personal life in his last years?
Well, he met a girl in Mexico named Maria. She gave him children, gave him 4 sons. They were married. Then it was very difficult. A man who has to think, who has 4 children to educate, he was very good with the children, had very good feelings. He died adoring his children, having them well and giving them everything.
Victoria, what did he suffer from? What disease?
Well, I'll say one thing. I was there in 1964 beyond. I saw him very thin. I said, "Rafael, what's wrong? Why are you so thin?" "It's not me. I don't want to be so thin." Then in December, Maria wrote saying that Rafael had entered the hospital. I'm talking about 1964. He urinated blood, and they did exploratory surgery, finding that he had a tumor in the bladder.
Victoria, thank you for sharing the memories of your brother, Rafael Hernandez, our glorious Puerto Rican composer. May God bless you I am eternally grateful. Eli puts on a record and greets the next guest, Bobby Capó. And you say, Eli?
I have an anecdote about the amazing Bobby Capó. He's family. No, really. I remember when he came in for the first time to be interviewed by Gilda. He was a very well-dressed man, tall man. I kind of looked at him and I said, wow, he looks kind of familiar to me. And in speaking to my mother about him, later she confirmed this to me. She informed me that the Capó family is actually related to her. Can you believe that? He was like a distant cousin, like a third cousin in the family. Anyway, he was always a class act. Every time he came into the studio, he came in with respect. He would greet Gilda with a loving hug or a kiss on the hand or on the cheek. And he would hug her, and you could tell that it was genuine. Some guests, you could see that they were doing it because they had to. But Bobby Capó was always a gentleman, well-dressed and well-versed. That's what I remember the most about him.
The lights change, vapor, now the scene, video plays, center screen, Bobby Capó walking on Broadway, Times Square. He's singing Lamento Borincano, flashing. There's a choreography done of the Bolero live. Then a live actor playing Bobby Capó walks in. You can hear Piel Canela. The author is Bobby Capó. And everybody feels so comfortable and so familiar with Bobby that we forget that he's a fabulous composer. And when Bobby goes to the other world in 1,000 years, they will say, oh, what an extraordinary song came from this boy from Coamo, Puerto Rico. How are you, Bobby?
Well, thank you. No. I'm satisfied with 50 more years.
If you were mute, you would burst.
Exploded, no? No. I am content with 50 more years. No. But the truth is that I feel in recent years a little sadness because so many performers of my age have passed. Composers, musicians, singers. Sincerely, you are left alone.
Really? Do you feel that way?
Yes, it makes me sad. For example, last night I was at Panchito's wake. One then starts to walk the same path.
You reflected.
Reflect and said, gosh.
But
life.
Bobby, you will leave so much to the world. You have given so much to the world.
The world has given me more. God has been great with me. I have never stopped.
You don't know how to stop, nor do you want to stop.
It is difficult for the person in the arts, in music. You cannot. If you don't do it physically, you do it spiritually or mentally.
How many years are you celebrating in the arts?
Well, if you count since I started to give the first squeals singing, since I was born. For example, I worked at a theater when I was 8 years old in Puerto Rico, in Cuba.
Singing?
Yes, singing. It was a local theater company. They thought of introducing me as a surprise. They prepared me in a hurry with a tuxedo. And I remember that I sang Green Eyes. What I really wanted to do when I had some judgment of life was to be a lawyer. Yes, but I started singing because I couldn't study. I couldn't go to college, so I started listening to singers, Davilita, to Panchito. I heard them. They were the singers popular at that time, Pedro Vargas. Anyway, I said, well, I will not be better than them, but I can try in that field. And as that already begun in the school program that I was in at school, representing the school in the disease, Quiñones Vidal recognized me and he said, this boy, I've seen him here before. Isn't it true? Would you dare to sing here now?
With Rafael Seijo?
Yes, Rafael Seijo. His was the first, I would say, professional trio in San Juan. During the program, he asked me if I wanted to sing. I stayed. I sang again. And at the end, he gave me $1. At that time, $1 was a day's wage for a teacher. So I started singing 6 days a week, $6.
The other day, I saw on Spanish TV something about your tours with Maestro Rafael Hernandez and Mirta Silva.
Candela, fire.
About the love-hate relationship that you had. But you were always together, right?
Yes, a rare type of brotherhood. But it was a brotherhood.
But you did very few tours with Rafael Hernandez.
And we broke it too.
That was the best schooling for a young man.
Of course. When I first started with Rafael Hernandez, the first thing he told me was, well, from now on, don't sing anybody else's songs. I thought at the time it was selfishness to sing nothing but his songs. But what he meant was not to sing songs which had been sung by Pedro Vargas, which had been sung by Davilita. So I could create my own style, my own personality as a singer. Because when one begins, if you hear Pedro Vargas, or if you hear whichever you hear, unconsciously you begin to imitate them, and you will sing like them. And that was what Rafael Hernandez didn't want.
Who was it that told you that your voice trembled?
Rafael Hernandez. Well, you know that when I started working with Rafael Hernandez, I was already working with Quiñones Vidal. I already earned $12, and Rafael asked me to replace Davilita, who was ill. He was really sick, and they had to travel to Colombia. So I took Davilita's place with the promise, and there was a subtle deception, that I was going to be Rafael Hernandez's interpreter on records and everything else. So I was completely wild about the idea of being the singer of the biggest composer. In my concept, the best. But once in Cuba, once in Colombia, Rafael was writing a song, which if I'm not mistaken, was Night and Day. He was writing it, and I was mad about the song, and I went over to him and asked, Rafael, is that song for me? Thinking that I would be the one to record that song. And apparently he was not in a very good mood and said, look, Bobby, I'm going to be frank with you. I can't risk taking you to any recording label because your voice trembles too much.
Oh my gosh, what a big blow to a young man.
For me it was. And from then on, Mirta Silva grabbed me. May she rest in peace. May they all both rest in peace. And whichever, and whatever, anything, she said, bah, little goat, because my voice, bah, trembled.
She was bad.
Oh, girl, she was, as they say, I was livid. But it helped me a lot because I practiced. I had never taken a singing class. I didn't know what singing was about formally. I was singing because God gave me a gift.
A gift?
A gift. But I never studied singing, so then I did some exercises. The issue is that I started to sustain the voice until I heard that vibrating was less. The trembling was less.
Oh, miracle that you didn't develop an inferiority complex, or did you?
I did develop a complex. Imagine, whenever I was going to sing with Rafael Hernandez on the radio shows in Colombia, the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm going to spoil this with my tremor.
And then Mirta with her.
And then Mirta calling me little goat. Bah.
Oh my God.
Therefore, I improved slightly, thanks to the criticism from Rafael. But when I realized that I wasn't going to be Rafael's interpreter, it sincerely disappointed me very much. And when we arrived in Cali, from there we were going to Bogota and possibly continue to Venezuela. We arrived in Cali, and I said, there is a seaport nearby. I know that it is Buenaventura. And I said, here I leave. I'm not staying because I don't have any future with Rafael. And so I left. The group broke up. They insulted me, practically killing me there. But I was going to do it. I knew already that with him, I would never record. So then I caught the ship Santa Clara from the Grace Line. Well, they all took the same ship. When I got to New York, that one that really arranged everything for me to record was Piquito Marcano of the Marcano Quartet.
So how did you manage that?
Well, because there were some programs on the Latino theater that was 110th Street and 5th Avenue. And there were the new artists there, the new artists performed. And since I had supposedly arrived with Rafael Hernandez, I had the opportunity to perform there with Piquito. And Piquito Mercano was accompanying everyone. He was enthusiastic and wanted me to record with him. But supposedly I had signed with Rafael Hernandez, according to his sister Victoria, told different record labels. So then they didn't give me an opportunity. Piquito insisted and asked me if I was sure that I didn't have a contract. I told him, I guarantee you I don't have a contract with Rafael Hernandez. So finally the Columbia label took the risk.
Your first recording was?
With Columbia Records, it was night and day.
Oh, many people thought you were Cuban. How did you identify so well with the Cuban people and they with you?
Well, what happened was that when I arrived in Cuba, in fact, I was 24 years old, and even though I was known in New York, Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Colombia, in the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rican, and when I got to Cuba, I don't know, the truth was that they liked me very much and even thought that I was Cuban because I would sing daily on their radio station, Cadena Azul.
Tell me about honeymoon in Puerto Rico, luna de miel in Puerto Rico.
Luna de Miel in Puerto Rico was a romantic thing that I wrote. But what happened was that at the time, the cha-cha-cha had become fashionable. At least it sounded a lot in Cuba, the cha-cha-cha. I heard it at that time. The cha-cha-cha was the rhythm, but the dance steps were like shuffling. And I said, wow, this is what's coming now. So I grabbed my song and changed it. Changed the rhythm to cha-cha-cha. Do you know that I brought the cha-cha-cha to New York? The steps from Cuba. I brought them here to New York. I had everyone dragging their feet at the Palladium, at the old Palladium. I went to Mexico and I introduced it in Mexico. And that is how it became popular.
We have some music of Luna de Miel in Puerto Rico, cha-cha-cha. We have the dancer choreographers coming in, the dancers coming in. Now we are going to change vapor, lights, and we hear Luna Barranquillera. Spotlight on Eli.
As you know, New York City is a huge melting pot of different people from different backgrounds and cultures. But after you've lived here for a while, we all end up being New Yorkers at heart, right? Working on the radio, all those years with Gilda, I could tell that all these singers, composers, musicians from all over Latin America that she interviewed all shared a love for this great city. You could hear it in their voices and in their stories, their love for New York and this country that had given them so much throughout their careers. For example, Esther Forero Celis, better known as Esthercita Forero, or La Novia de Barranquilla, who was a Colombian singer and songwriter.
We hear the music, Luna Barranquillera, and we see Esthercita in a photo, light, vapor, and Esthercita. Here we have Esther, Esther Forero. When did you write that?
Do you know that La Luna de Barranquilla was born in New York?
I don't believe it.
I'll tell you about it. I was walking, and I have a passion for the building that I love so very much, the Empire State. I have a special love for it. I don't know why, but a tremendous emotion. Because when I go to the top and I see New York, I feel it's so close. I love this city very much. Then I saw the moon split in two by the top, the needle of the building, Empire State.
Of the Empire State Building?
It was very white, very beautiful. It was winter and there was snow. That made me nostalgic for our moon. And I came to a conclusion, and nobody could take it out of my head, that our moon is a brunette. And it's true. It's a brunette.
How many songs have you written, Esther?
Well, around 100. But I don't like them, not one of them, because it seems to me that I should have done better. And I'm dissatisfied. I'm a perfectionist. I feel immense excitement whenever I talk about this, and I say it with all my heart, not with my words. I owe my international career to Rafael Hernandez. I was a girl who sung boleros, with a lot of themes, whatever was popular. Then it came to me, blessed be God, the news about folklore. It impassioned me, and I dedicated myself to sing my coastal music and spread it. I took it to Venezuela for the first time in 1945. It was a great success, and since the Venezuelans began to record Colombian music. Then I went to Santo Domingo and to Puerto Rico, and the gates of heaven opened for me. Maestro Rafael Hernandez even took me to his house. I was a close friend of his wife who gave me a hand. Then I recorded Pegadito de los Hombres with his orchestra, and Maestro Rafael Hernandez told me, I will never forget it, that I could write music. I don't know music, Gilda, but here in New York I dared. Who knows why? My coastal music was an extraordinary success, a very big success, a hit. The record label requested costeña music, porros, cumbias, or anything. Then I remembered Maestro Rafael Hernandez's words, and I wrote music. I dared, and I am still daring.
And you did. You are blessed by God. Then we hear Campanitas de Cristal. Esther, how lovely bells. You're something special. I think it's the memory of Rafael Hernandez.
Yes, of course, his influence.
Thank you for being here.
And I want to thank you because you have been very generous with me. And to feel, as Gilda Mirós says, unified, as the community we should be, the Latin American community, not only in New York, but in the world. We are a family, one family united by one language, by one heart. Kisses for that great Latino American family.
Lights fades, and the stage spotlight on Eli. And then we go into Machito and another part of the script. That's all for now. Thank you. But I want to tell you, when the review, God willing, goes on stage, we will have Machito Jr. playing his father, Tito Puente Jr. playing his father, La Lupe Jr. playing her mother, La Lupe. And the person that's going to play me is a disc jockey. That's on the air now. So that's it. It's our dream maybe coming too soon. Thank you very much for listening.